Good morning, everyone. My name is Daniel Payares-Montoya, and I'm a research associate with the Public Policy Institute of California's Higher Education Center. Thank you for tuning in for our program today, featuring the findings of a new PPIC report, English as a Second Language at California's Community Colleges, an early examination of AB 705 reforms. I would like to thank the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Southern Family Fund for their support of this research and today's event. If you are interested in learning more, the report, policy brief, technical appendices, as well as the slides from today's presentation are available in our website at ppic.org. For today's program, I will present the key findings from our report and then invite my colleagues and co-authors, Laura Hill and Olga Rodriguez, to join me for a discussion of additional takeaways. I want also to thank Rogelio Salazar, who provided research support for this report. But before I begin, there are a couple of housekeeping items to cover. As a reminder, PPIC is a public charity and does not take or support positions on any ballot measure or legislation, nor does it support, endorse, or oppose any political parties or candidates for public office. And at the end of today's program, we have set aside some time to answer audience questions. If you have a question for us, please send an email to the address on the screen, ppiceventquestions@gmail.com. And be sure to include your name and organization along with your question. And with that, I will begin my presentation. Every year, thousands of English learners with a range of goals, citizenship statuses, and educational backgrounds enroll ESL coursework at community colleges. Some intend to improve their English language skills or access better labor market opportunities. Others enroll with the goal of obtaining a college degree or certificate or transferring to a four-year university. Some of these students take ESL courses in community colleges after graduating from a US high school, while others have completed various levels of education in their home countries. The range of educational backgrounds and motivations make it challenging to serve this population. ESL is relevant because English proficiency is related to economic mobility, access to high-wage jobs, lower levels of underemployment and unemployment, and greater productivity, all aspects that contribute to Californians' well-being. Colleges have made important improvements in recent years to serve English learners. However, research has found ample room to address the bottlenecks students still face, like those related to placement policies and lengthy course sequences. Partly in response to that research, Assembly Bill 705 sought to increase successful completion of transfer-level math and English courses by addressing systemic problems in traditional placement policies and curricular structures. AB 705 requires colleges to maximize the probability that ESL students complete transfer-level English within 3 years. And it also requires colleges to use high school records as the primary criteria for ESL placement. It also clarifies that ESL is distinct from remediation in English and that students enrolled in ESL credit coursework are foreign language learners seeking proficiency in an additional language. System-wide ESL reform was scheduled for fall 2020. However, the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic and spring 2020 delayed the implementation by a full year. The delay gave colleges more time to prepare, but the planning that had been done on the placement and curricular front had to be rapidly moved online in response to the pandemic. Faculty and students had to deal with different challenges, like the lack of access to technology or internet connection, and the lack of experience teaching and learning remotely. Successful implementation of AB 705 will contribute to economic mobility and increase Californians' well-being. This report intends to shed light on the changes and progress colleges have made toward implementing AB 705 across the California Community Colleges system in fall 2021. We build on our previous research on ESL in California community colleges, and we use qualitative and quantitative data, including colleges' websites, catalogs, and course schedules, as well as AB 705 adoption plans. We also use student-level data from all 115 colleges provided by the Chancellor's Office. And we conducted interviews with ESL faculty and department chairs at 16 colleges across the state. On aggregate, we find that AB 705 has led to remarkable changes to placement and credit ESL course sequences. However, it is challenging to disentangle the effects of the pandemic from the impact of AB 705 as they happen at the same time. Severe enrollment declines induced by the COVID-19 pandemic have been widely documented at California's community colleges. ESL enrollments also experienced step declines in fall 2020 that have persisted ever since. As the figure shows, the number of ESL students, orange bars, declined by 40% between 2019 fall semester and the 2020 fall semester. For the subgroup of ESL degree intending students, the blue bars, the reduction was 28%. About 1/3 of all English learners intend to pursue a degree or transfer to a four-year college. A subsection of our report focuses on this subgroup of English learners who intend to continue their community college education beyond ESL coursework, as they are supposed to be the main beneficiaries of AB 705. On the other hand, enrollment declines were also expected, given that AB 705 now requires that all the U.S. high school graduates be placed into college's composition, including students flagged as English learners. However, enrollment declines have also affected the students' composition, making it nearly impossible to distinguish the enrollment effects of the pandemic versus AB 705. English learners may end up placed in three types of transfer-level English courses. The first one, transfer-level English. These are offered by English departments and qualify as getaway courses. The second one, transfer-level English for ESL students. These are English composition courses offered by ESL departments. And finally, transfer-level English for multilingual speakers. These are transfer-level English courses designed to provide additional language support for English learners that may require it inside the class or to prerequisite courses. These courses are offered by English departments. A growing number of colleges now offer a transfer-level English ESL equivalent course, a transfer-level English designed for multilingual speakers, or ESL prerequisite support for transfer-level English. Moving to findings, we found that colleges implemented AB 705 reforms despite COVID-19 challenges, and were able to change placement policies, shorten ESL sequences, and offer different alternatives to ESL students looking to transfer. Direct access to college composition increased for English learners who are U.S. high school graduates. Title V now stipulates that English learners who are U.S. high school graduates must be assessed using high school records and given direct access to transfer-level English or transfer-level English ESL equivalent courses. We find that 83% colleges report using high school records and the default rules to place this group of students into these courses. For students who did not graduate from a U.S. high school, placement policies have varied considerably over time compared with what a previous PPIC study found in 2014. The use of assessment tests declined significantly, and self-placement and guided placement are now the most used methods to place students. Also, the use of high school records more than doubled since 2014. Some of these changes were accelerated by the pandemic. However, we still find continued variation in the scores that determine ESL placement. Variation across colleges in placement policies and ESL sequences could potentially undercut equitable access and success, as it means that an English learner's likelihood of enrolling in or completing college composition may depend on which college that English learner attends. In terms of sequence length, 87% of colleges now offer sequences with 5 or fewer levels. Our interviews suggested that most ESL departments started to change their ESL curricula in anticipation of the AB 705 deadline. Prior to AB 705, 54% of colleges offer sequences with at least 6 levels, making it impossible for students starting at the first level to complete transfer-level English within 3 years. Nonetheless, for non-degree intending students, longer sequences still can make sense as they intend to improve their English language or their labor market opportunities. At the same time, we find that students in ESL sequences are much more likely to start just one level below transfer-level English, close to 20% in fall 2021 compared to 8% in academic year 2016-2017. While keep in mind that direct access to college composition increased for English learners who are U.S. high school graduates, and most students are now going directly to transfer-level English courses. Now we examine outcomes for transfer level English ESL, and transfer level English for multilingual students in fall 2021. 160,000 students, 750 students, and 230 students, respectively. Fall 2021 was the first semester when community colleges were required to implement the new placement procedures and course structures mandated under AB 705. First-time students passed transfer level English at a rate of 59%. For transfer level English ESL and transfer level English for multilingual speakers, the rates were 70% and 75%, respectively. Due to data limitations, we are unable to identify the group of English learners who bypass ESL courses and enroll directly in transfer level English. And we cannot tell how well English learners are doing in those mainstream gateway courses. Hopefully, with the cradle-to-career data system in place, we will be able to do so in the future. In addition, given the small sample sizes, we will need more students and college level data to have a more definitive conclusion on passing rates. Across ethnic groups, there are some meaningful differences in passing rates. First-time Asian students were the most likely to pass standard transfer level English courses, 73%, followed by white students, 68%. Latino students taking transfer level English ESL have higher passing rates than those placed in a standard transfer level English, 61% versus 53%. However, passing rates for Latino students are lower in transfer level English for multilingual speakers than in transfer level English ESL or transfer level English courses. Overall, transfer level English ESL passing rates are higher than transfer level English passing rates for all ethnic groups. Other socioeconomic and demographic differences in passing rates are presented in a more detailed way in the report, but it's worth mentioning that US citizens are more likely to pass a standard transfer level English course. Permanent residents and student visa holders are the most likely to pass transfer level English ESL courses, and international high school graduates in transfer level English for multilingual speaker classes outperform those in transfer level English ESL. Finally, in terms of policy recommendation, the report suggests to first, expand access to college composition to all English learners. As the report suggests, providing direct access to college composition to English learners produces higher rates of successful completion than require English learners to begin in an ESL course below college composition. Second, the report recommends monitoring the validity and effectiveness of placement rules. English learners' likelihood of enrolling in college composition should not depend on which college that English learner attends. Otherwise, inequitable outcomes will persist, as a student's chance of completing transfer level English will continue to depend on where that student enrolls in college. The third recommendation is to make connections between ESL reforms and other system-wide initiatives. Offering transferable ESL courses through CCAP, dual enrollment partnerships, full bus enrollment, and also boost college going among English learner students in high school. Colleges could also offer ESL milestone certificates to recognize students' achievements in learning a language and completing prerequisite courses in a program of study. This will connect ESL with AB 705, guided pathways, and the vision for success. The fourth recommendation is to provide guidance and information to support ongoing implementation efforts. ESL faculty and department chairs express a desire for more formative guidance and information from the Chancellor's Office about how AB 705 implementation is going. It will be also important to clarify how AB 1705 will affect ESL. Finally, the last recommendation is to establish a longitudinal data system that identifies English learners across educational systems. As I mentioned, one notable limitation of this study is that we are unable to observe all English learners who enroll in the community colleges. Longitudinal data is especially critical for accurately identifying and meeting the needs of English learners. And with that, I conclude the presentation portion of our event today. Just a reminder that we will now have a discussion which will expand on everything I just talked about. But if you have any specific questions you would like to ask, please send them to ppiceventquestions@gmail.com, and we will attempt to answer them towards the end of our event. And with that, I invite my colleagues and co-authors, Laura Hill and Olga Rodriguez, to join me for a discussion of additional takeaways. Thank you, Laura and Olga, for joining us. Okay. I have mentioned a few times during the presentation that the timing of the pandemic affected the implementation of AB 705 and makes evaluating it challenging. Laura, could you talk a bit more about why is that difficult?
Yes, thanks, Daniel. I'd be glad to. I'll just highlight some of the biggest challenges. And first, I just want to remind everyone that while the course sequences and structures were definitely already changing in many cases because of AB 705, and lots of those changes were implemented in the fall of 2021, the pandemic meant that while these course sequences and structures were changing, the courses all also moved online at that same time, or even before the full implementation. And many of these courses were still online in fall of 2021. So while we might want to attribute any changes in course success to AB 705 reforms, the fact is that the manner in which these courses were taught totally changed at the same time and might muddy this conclusion a bit. So that's the first main challenge. And I'd say the second main challenge is that that placement policies that were changing because of AB 705 really did happen in dramatic ways. We saw from one of your figures, Danielle, that the guided self-placement really increased, as did the use of high school records. And then there are all these students who went directly into transfer level English, and there was much less reliance on standardized testing. But the manner in which students were interacting with the placement process really changed because of the pandemic. Everything went online. So while in the past there might have been some face-to-face meetings with counselors or some face-to-face work on assessment, that all completely moved online. So we can't attribute any of those changes in successful placement entirely to the changes in the process, because we now know that some of that was online too. And the third, and I think pretty big other main challenge of kind of disentangling the effect of AB 705 from the pandemic is that the students for whom we're trying to understand if this was successful or not changed in dramatic ways for both from the pandemic and from AB 705. So we saw from one of your early figures, Danielle, that the pandemic induced some severe enrollment declines. And that was true for all students, not just ESL students, but especially among the population served by ESL departments at community colleges. And these declines weren't even really uniform across all types of ESL students. We saw that overall the decline was about 40%, but among those ESL students who are student visa holders, the decline was more severe, about 55%. So that's going on. And at the same time, we've got this new structure where essentially we're placing English learners who are US high school graduates directly into transfer level English. We're not really like observing them in the ESL population. So we would expect if AB 705 is working, we're going to see fewer ESL students. So then we can't really ascribe the decline in the ESL population to AB 705 as we might have been able to if there had not been this pandemic at the exact same time. So the pandemic is making this inference a little bit difficult.
Thank you for that, Laura. Nevertheless, we find that California community colleges have made important progress in implementing AB 705's ESL reforms. And in fact, we find that there are some silver linings emerging from the pandemic. So maybe Olga, can you tell us a bit more about what this meant for assessment and placement, please?
Yes, thank you so much, Daniel, for that question. So I think even from Daniel's remarks and from what Laura just said, I think we could see that the pandemic posed both a number of challenges, but also opportunities for the assessment placement process at colleges across the state and actually across the country, because everybody was going through this at the same time. And so as some of you already may know, community colleges have traditionally relied on standardized placement tests to determine placements. And when the pandemic hit, these on-campus testing centers were shut down, as were all other administrative and classrooms in the spring 2020. And so as a result of this, colleges were asked to design and launch these fully remote systems, as Laura just noted, and launch these in spring 2020. And those have been in place mostly ever since the pandemic. And in fact, I want to mention that this process had already started as a result of AB 705. And especially in math and English, by the time the pandemic hit, colleges no longer relied on these physical testing centers. And so in fact, some ESL departments were already moving in this direction. It just happens that the pandemic helped us accelerate this process for ESL. And so in California and in other states and systems, what we saw is that most colleges adopted the use of high school records, guided placement or self-placement methods. And they use, for example, things like self-reported GPA, self-assessments of skills, and colleges also provided information about the different ESL options for students. And then students typically made a decision, sometimes on their own or in conversation with a counselor or ESL faculty to decide what course was better for them. And so when we did our interviews with ESL faculty and department chairs, all agreed that while the move to online and remote assessments was not easy, this prospect of continuing these is actually brings with it an opportunity to actually make these placement processes more accessible, and with it, courses more accessible as well. And one of the things that we learned is that these placement processes now that they're online, can actually also be made available in multiple languages. So I'd just say that, so the silver lining here is that the pandemic accelerated the use of these online placement processes, and thus it improved access, and it's also engaging students more in the placement process. And I just want to mention that our department chairs noted that engaging students in this way actually empowers them more in their education, and it gets them to buy in more because they have a say in what courses they're actually going to enroll in. Previously, a cut score just printed out a report and told students where to go. And so, yeah, so this is a complete switch. So thank you, Daniel.
Thank you for that, Olga. And Laura, can you tell us more about how the pandemic affected faculty, students, and ESL departments? And please highlight some silver linings that emerged there.
Sure. In our interviews with ESL faculty and department chairs, it was clear that there were some silver linings, but it definitely took a while for them to reveal themselves. And there certainly were hardships. Health and safety concerns were really paramount for faculty and for their students, and that went on for many, many months. And some faculty noted that the ways in which they usually build community among their students and in their classrooms were really challenged by remote instruction. They also noted the challenges that they faced in not being able to confer easily with other faculty members about maybe placements that didn't seem right for students, or adjustments they wanted to make to instruction, or following up on how a particular student was doing. And they also noted just how incredibly difficult it was to move everything online in the beginning. And it might still be challenging for some faculty as well as for some students, that these technologies are still a work in progress for many folks. But the biggest silver lining that was remarked on by many people was that really they felt that the movement to online instruction did provide access to many, many more students, many more types of students. So there were instances reported to us of students who were able to take an ESL class on a break during shift work, sometimes from the cafeteria and wherever they were working, or from the fields even, or just at home with children in the background or children napping. And this provided access for people who would not have been able to leave their home or work setting to get to the community college campus and participate in an in-person class. So providing access to a richer group, a more diverse group of students, was something really important that faculty noted. But Danielle, I know you've thought a bit about some of the challenges, the opportunities, but also the challenges in providing so much instruction online. Can I ask you to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. Well, we saw colleges, ESL departments, and faculty rapidly moving to online courses in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And we know that all ESL stakeholders we interviewed for the report agreed that while the move to online teaching and learning was not easy, this new method brings with it the opportunity to make courses more accessible. And we also know by different surveys that not all students are eager to go back to traditional face-to-face instruction, and that prospective students have cited access to online courses as one important factor motivating their enrollment in community colleges. In that regard, stakeholders should keep in mind that we need to provide appropriate incentives for faculty and colleges, not only to broaden student access to online services and resources, but also to improve online instruction. Online learning is going to be a big part of higher education. I mean, already is, and quality needs to be also advanced at the same time as access. And with that, I will move to the next question. And along with the transfer level English course access, we also recommended in the report that college monitor the validity and effectiveness of placement rules. And this is especially critical given that one of our main findings is that there continues to be notable variation in placement policies and ESL course offerings. This is not entirely surprising given that the size of the system and the relative autonomy of colleges and districts when implementing AB 705. Nevertheless, our current study, PPIC recent research on AB 705 in math and English shows that this variation has important equity implications. So here I would like to ask you, Olga, if you can please elaborate on how this variation across colleges in placement policies and ESL sequences could potentially undercut equitable access and success.
Thank you, Daniel. Yes, so this is an excellent question. And so I'll start by recapping some of our findings. When we analyzed the use of ESL assessment tests, we found that colleges, even colleges using the same tests, that colleges that are using tests actually have longer sequences as well, on average about one more courses in their sequence on average than colleges not using tests. When we also took a closer look at the cut scores that are used for these tests, we found that colleges using the same instrument are also sometimes using the different cut scores to determine access to the highest level of ESL courses offered at their campus. And so this in some cases could be the transfer level for ESL students. It could all the transfer level comp for ESL students or the highest level of ESL that is before college comp. And so this variation in cut scores is something we found in our last study of assessment and placement back in when we asked about 2014-15 placement policies. So to see that this was still happening was a little puzzling. Because you would assume that one cut score would give you access to the same course at all campuses, and that's not happening. And so what this means in practice is that a student with the same score, say 115 on the AccuPlacer reading test, who enrolls at a college with no transfer level ESL equivalent course will be referred to the one level below college comp, while this same student will be referred to this transfer level ESL college comp at the college that does offer this option. And so this is a little concerning because it also heightens the importance of ensuring that all colleges provide English learners with some form of access to transfer level English with additional language support if necessary. And in the current situation we're in, where English learners, an English learner starting point, and their likelihood of completing transfer level, the transfer level English course is largely dependent on where the student attends, as Daniel noted earlier, I think. And so this is kind of where this inequity starts to emerge. And you could see how this can trickle down. It lowers the likelihood of students completing this course and then affects other outcomes as well. So I'll end there. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you for that. As I mentioned in the presentation, Title V now requires colleges to place English learners who are U.S. high school graduates in college composition. Since some of these English learners may need language support, a growing number of colleges are offering a transfer level English ESL equivalent course, a transfer level English designed for multilingual speakers, or ESL core requisites to support the transfer level English class. So far, success rates in those courses are higher than rates in traditional transfer level English offered by English departments, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, or age. Based on our findings and aligned with recent research by PACE, we too recommend expanding access to college composition for all English learners. Laura, can you talk more about our recommendation to expand access to college composition to English learners? Please also mention what should colleges keep in mind as they expand access to college composition for English learners.
Sure. I first just want to remind everyone that relatively few students have actually taken these classes as of fall 2021, because not that many campuses are offering them yet. It's about 20. And our findings are based on fewer than about 1,000 students who took them across these 20 campuses. And second, I'll note that these courses can take some time to implement. The TLE, the transfer level English classes that are offered through the ESL departments require the cooperation of the English department in getting these all set up. And then if they're going to be transferring to the CSU or UC systems, that also involves working with those systems to ensure that the credit is granted. Third, while securing the credit to UC and CSU provide some manner of quality control for the classes, there's just going to be more variability as the number of these classes expand across many campuses and across many instructors. So it'll be important to keep an eye on student equity and student access and student success in each of these offerings in their diverse campuses and the diverse ways that they may be taught. And finally, there really hasn't been enough time yet to see if the students who are passing these TLE classes with support, either ESL or multilingual instruction, designed for multilingual learners, or co-requisite supports, if they're having the same success after these classes as students who are passing the traditional transfer level English. So it'd be important to keep an eye on that as these offerings expand and make sure that any refinements that are required to those courses get made so that students are successful.
Thank you for that, Laura. And now is the time to move to our audience Q&A portion of the session. And we have a question from Kadi from Cypress College. Do you have any suggestions for colleges to track successful completion of English learner high school graduates who took transfer level English? Are there any coding markers that will allow colleges to conduct this research? Who wants to jump in?
So I think I'm happy to take a stab at this. I'll start with the ideal, which we don't yet have, but we're optimistic that sometime in the future this will be available. There is a good bit of work going on to link the data systems from the PK-12 data system to the community college data system. And if we were able to look at those data, we could see the individual students who were English learners, either remained English learners at the time they graduated or had already been reclassified, and then follow them as they transition into the community college system. And then we could see with complete certainty who those students were and how they're faring depending on the placements that they end up in, if they're going straight into transfer level English with no support or into one of these transfer level English courses for multilingual learners or transfer level English and ESL. In our work, that's the best case scenario, and we don't have that yet. In our work, what we were able to do is look at students who may have been in the system already and maybe participated in ESL prior to the fall 2021 semester. And there is a little bit more about that in our report. And obviously the students that do end up in TLE multilingual or TLE ESL or in a TLE with co-requisite, those are students who through the placement process have chosen that given that it's available. But for the students who go directly into TLE and came from high school graduate situation and were English learners, we cannot see them in the data at this point. And Danielle, Olga, feel free to jump in if you have more to add.
I'll just add, I think this connects with, I saw Ellison's from American Rivers College had a question about because we are unable to flag English learners in the kind of traditional TLE courses, how can we provide accurate pass rates? So we clarify in our report that the pass rates that we provide are for this population are for comparison purposes only, and we caveat the fact that we know English learners are now going there because of AB 705, but because this data limitation, as Laura noted, we cannot kind of tell you exactly how English learners are doing in those courses. What we can do is tell you how English learners going to the college composition courses that have been designed specifically for them, how they're doing, and what our research suggests is that they're doing very well. As we know that colleges are already thinking about continuing to adopt these, we identified about 20 colleges in fall 2021, and know that more are now offering them, because we knew a few of the ones that we talked to were getting ready to implement in fall 2022. So it is, as Laura just discussed, it is something that we recommend because of the increased pass rates, but as colleges scale, just to be aware that they're just attentive to kind of all the complexities that Laura just described. But yeah, I'll end there.
Thank you, Olga. So this is another question we received from a policy researcher in the Bay Area that is asking us to dive a little deeper into our recommendation that colleges make deliberately connections between ESL reforms and other system-wide initiatives. So I think this may be for you, Olga. Can you talk to us more about the opportunities that you see for having AB 705 in ESL working alongside other larger system-wide initiatives to help boost English learner student outcomes, please?
Yes, thanks so much, Daniel. So I'd love to talk about this, because I see this as one of the most promising developments of AB 705, and which AB 705 really helped accelerate. There was already some momentum, but AB 705 just kicked it into high gear. And more specifically, we see that these rising number of ESL courses that are transferable to both UC and CSU, as offering opportunities to connect ESL reforms to a variety of larger system-wide initiatives. And you alluded to a few of them during your presentation. And so the first is by offering these transfer level ESL equivalent courses, colleges are now actively contributing to the key metric used in the Vision for Success and the funding formula for helping boost the number of English learners who complete College Comp course, which is a key milestone on the road to degree and transfer. And back when we did our study of the 2016 cohort, there were only 5 colleges that offered this option. And in some of those cases, these College Comp courses didn't always transfer to both UC and CSU. So what we're seeing now is a great improvement. So seeing kind of this grow is really promising. So the next kind of opportunity that we see is by using these transfer level ESL courses to provide pathways to English learners in high school through dual enrollment partnerships. And this is especially important because English learners are significantly less likely to attend college. And given PPIC's dual enrollment research, if community colleges were to build on the momentum we're currently seeing with dual enrollment to support English learners, especially with CCAP programs, we could expect to see important boosts in college enrollments, while also improving equitable access to college for English learners. And so I just want to mention that Cuyamaca College is one site where ESL courses are already being offered to high school students through a dual enrollment partnership. And the last thing I'll mention is that colleges should also think about adopting an approach similar to what Cypress College has done, where they created ESL milestone certificates to recognize students' achievements in learning a foreign language and completing prerequisite courses tied to a program of study. And some of these certificates are offered in areas like social sciences, STEM, and health careers, just to name a few. And so this approach connects ESL with AB 705, guided pathways, and the funding formula and the larger system Vision for Success. And given my previous point on dual enrollment, what we envision as the next phase in this innovative work is by extending these milestone certificates to high school students through dual enrollment programs. And so this would even further strengthen the pathways for English learners into college and beyond. And so, yeah, very exciting. I think this is really opening a lot of exciting opportunities for English learners.
Thank you for that, Olga. And a final question we received from the audience is this person that identifies as a higher education data wonk, and he or she is asking us to tell us more about the challenges like researchers face when conducting research, given the data limitation and opportunities that a longitudinal data system would afford us in the future. So maybe, Laura, we can go with you for that one.
Sure. Yeah, I think I just want to start off by highlighting a couple of strengths, and then we could talk about the wishes from the data system. But both the PK-12 system and the community college system have great information about their students. The systems themselves and researchers can learn a great deal about student progress, including the things that impede or facilitate learning and success at the level of the system or the school, and all while protecting the identity of students. So there's a lot of fantastic information there which we can learn from. And in this instance, we focused just on the community college system data. But as I alluded to earlier, what we really can't do is link those two systems yet. I know there are instances where researchers have been able to link a couple of high schools to a college campus or some subset of them, but we haven't been able to do it at scale yet, meaning all of the high schools in the state, and then all of the community college systems in the state, and then ideally the CSUs and the UCs and all of that. And so once that can happen, this research, for example, would have been fantastic, because we could, even more fantastic, I should say, because we could follow, the English learner student from high school into their community college situation, and we could understand the role of AB 705 more cleanly, and see if those students that were English learners that graduated from US high schools placed into which of the transfer level English classes they placed into, and then how they did in that class. And then after that class, how did they succeed in their subsequent English classes? Are they earning associate's degrees? Are they earning four-year degrees and transferring? And is their time in the community college system shorter and more efficient for them as a result of AB 705? And we can also compare students who are not English learners and really get a better sense of just the efficacy of the program. So ultimately, I know there are a great number of very smart people working on this problem and making doing the work to compromise and get these data systems to talk to each other and do so in a way that's safe for others to use the data and make sure that identities are protected and that all the work is being put to the highest and best use. So we're really looking forward to a time when that will be available more broadly, and we can answer some of these important questions, and ideally even at some point be able to link to wage and earnings data in the future.
Thank you for that, Laura. And with that, we conclude our event today. Thank you, Olga and Laura, for joining, and thanks to all of you that tune in for our program today, featuring the findings of a new PPIC report, English as a Second Language at California Community Colleges, and early examination of AB 705 reforms. Have a good rest of your day.